I still remember that morning vividly, a beautiful sunny day with clear skies. And I walked into the hospital for a routine checkup as required by my company. It was a very normal day, and I even planned to stop by a coffee shop after my appointment to treat myself to an iced mocha. I didn't expect to receive any news other than the usual words of encouragement. Your blood pressure is stable, your heart is healthy, and you're eating well. However, the doctor's face suddenly fell when he looked at the scan results. He remained silent for so long that I had to speak up. "Is something wrong, doctor?" He looked up, his expression serious, his voice soft. "I think we should conduct some further specialized tests. There are a few abnormal readings." At that moment, I wasn't worried. People often say that test results can be inaccurate for various reasons. But then came the next test, followed by a biopsy, and then the endless waiting outside the doctor's office, with my hands clenched tightly together and my heart racing like I was awaiting a verdict. Finally, the news came. "You have a tumor. We suspect it's early-stage cancer." Nothing had prepared me for that moment. No one had ever taught me how to hear those words calmly. I felt like the room was spinning. The ground beneath my feet crumbled. My heart fell into an abyss. I was only in my 30s. I had my whole life ahead of me. I had plans I hadn't yet fulfilled, dreams I hadn't yet realized. I had elderly parents to care for, plans waiting to be started. Why me and why now? I walked out of the hospital like a zombie. The city was still bustling, people were still laughing and talking, cars were still speeding by as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had stopped. That night, I lay alone in my room, staring at the ceiling, feeling empty inside. Fear didn't come like a violent storm. It crept in like smoke, enveloping my thoughts. It whispered, "What if I don't make it? What if I have to endure the pain alone? What if no one really cares?" I had never thought about God before. In fact, I used to think I didn't need him. I lived well, was independent, and had morals. I thought good health was a reward for living right. But now, faced with this devastating news, I realized something. I was not in control. The news of my illness didn't just destroy my body, it destroyed the ego I had worked so hard to build. I thought I was invincible, but it turns out I'm very vulnerable. I thought I was strong, but it turns out I'm just dust that can vanish in an instant. I didn't cry right away. The tears only fell in the dead of night, when I could no longer maintain a calm facade, when all the layers fell away, revealing a weak, panicked soul that desperately needed to be held. And in that night, even though I didn't call his name, I began a journey through the darkness, not to avoid the pain, but to meet the one who could use that pain to change my life. I used to think that if I were seriously ill, the hardest part would be the physical pain. But that wasn't true. During those first days of facing my illness, I realized that the greatest pain wasn't in my body, it was in my soul. It was fear, not a vague fear, but a fear that was present in every breath, every irregular heartbeat, every hesitant glance from the doctor. Fear was like a shadow that followed me everywhere, even when the lights were on, even when I tried to act normal. Fear of death, fear of prolonged pain, fear of being a burden to others, fear of being forgotten, abandoned, fear that everything I had lived for, everything I had tried to achieve, was meaningless. I remember one evening, after receiving more test results, I went for a walk in the park near my house. The wind blew gently, the leaves rustled, and everything seemed peaceful as usual. But inside me there was a storm raging. I sat down on a stone bench and looked up at the sky. That was the first time I quietly thought, if I were to disappear, would the world change at all? No one knew how much pain I was in inside. I still smiled at my colleagues, still replied to my friends' messages, still kept my social media profile active. But in reality, I was slowly sinking, day by day. Some people said, stop thinking negatively. If you're sick, get treatment. I understood that they were right, but the truth was that illness didn't just destroy the body. It touched the deepest part of the soul. It asked the question, what is the meaning of my life? Is there anyone who will truly accompany me through this pain? If I die, is there anything waiting for me afterward? Or is it just the end? I began to fear the night, because at night no one talks, no one pretends to care, and there was no noise to distract me. Night is when I face myself and my own smallness, loneliness, and utter helplessness. One night I lay curled up, not because of the cold, but because of fear. My hands clutched the blanket, and my heart wanted to scream, but no one was listening. And then I whispered, if God is real, if He is, where is He? I don't know why I said that. I had never been close to God. I had only heard about Him through little stories from school or moral sayings from people of faith, but it had never been a real relationship. Yet in that moment, I didn't ask for anything. I didn't want to be cured. I just wanted to know I wasn't alone. I didn't need bright lights. I didn't need angels to appear. I just wanted to know that someone was with me in the darkness. And it was from that night that I began to long for something I didn't even understand, to meet God, even if only once, in the darkness of that night. As the pain continued and the medicine didn't work as expected, I began to ask questions, not to the doctor, not even to myself, but to God. These questions did not come from resentment or disrespect, but from a broken heart trying to find meaning in the midst of meaninglessness. Why me? What did I do wrong to deserve this? Is God punishing me? If He is a loving God, why is He letting me suffer like this? I remember one night when my body was exhausted from the side effects of the medication. I lay in my hospital bed staring at the white ceiling. My eyes were dry, with no tears left to cry. I whispered, "Where are you? Why won't you answer me?" But there was only silence. A silence so profound it choked me. A silence that made me doubt everything I had ever believed. A silence that made me wonder, does He really exist? And if He does, is He turning His face away from me? I remembered hearing people say that God is a loving Father, that He sees our tears, that He is always near those who suffer. But why, in the midst of my panic, in the midst of this emptiness with no way out, can I hear nothing but the sound of the ventilator, the footsteps of the nurses, and the slow, weary beat of my own heart? I begin to question myself. Have I lived wrongly? Is this karma? Is God teaching me a lesson? Am I unworthy of love? And the questions swirled like a storm inside me. No one answered. No one comforted me. Many people came to visit me. They brought flowers, porridge, words of comfort. But no one could answer the deepest questions in my heart. They avoided me or responded with empty phrases. It will be okay. You must believe in something good. God has a plan for you. I don't need plans. I need a real presence, a reason not to give up. I read the Bible like a drowning man clinging to a piece of wood, and I came across the words of Job, a man who lost everything and also asked God in pain, "Why was I ever born? Why did you create me only to afflict me?" I saw myself in him, a man who didn't understand, but still turned to God, a man who had nothing left but still spoke to Him. Perhaps God was silent, but I began to realize silence does not mean absence. God does not always answer immediately. He is not a vending machine. Give a command, get a response. He is the Holy One, and sometimes He answers through His very silence. A silence that made me pause. A silence that led me to dig deep within myself. A silence that led me to realize that faith is not believing when everything is clear. It is believing even when you don't understand. I still haven't received answers to all my questions, but in the midst of the darkness, I began to learn something. I don't need all the answers. I need His presence. And maybe He is still there in the silence, waiting for me to believe even when I cannot see, to take steps even when I am unsure, to live even when I do not understand. During the day, I am still me, the person who used to be strong, who encouraged others, who was good at hiding my pain. I still nod when someone asks, "Are you okay?" And I respond like a machine, "Yeah, I'm fine. It'll pass." I know people don't want to see the truth. They can't bear to see true weakness. And to be honest, I can't bear to see it in myself either. I don't want to be a burden to anyone. I don't want to be the sick person who always needs comfort. I don't want pitying looks or thoughtless comments like, "You have to be positive." There are people who are worse off than you. You have to be strong for your loved ones. I smile because I don't know what else to do. I force myself to smile because no one taught me how to feel pain, honestly. But when night falls, all the masks fall away. There's only me and raw pain. Some nights I can't sleep, not because of physical pain, but because of the confusion, fear, and feeling of abandonment that surround me. I stare at the ceiling and ask myself, God, if you're there, are you watching me? Can you see me trembling? Can you see my tears? Then I burst into tears, not screaming, not moaning, just crying, alone, in silence, in the darkness. I began to understand. There are pains that cannot be put into words. There are tears that need no reason. They fall because the soul is too weary. And then in the middle of such a night, when my tears were almost gone, a verse from the Bible flashed into my mind, though I couldn't remember where I had read it. He counts the number of my tears. He keeps them in his bottle. Psalm 56:8. I was speechless. God counts my tears. He doesn't just know, he keeps them. Not discarded, not forgotten, but treasured. I'm not sure where that came from. Maybe it was a sermon I heard years ago. Maybe someone read it to me once. But in that moment, it became a tiny light in the thick darkness. I'm still not okay. I'm still tired, still crying, still panicking. But I'm beginning to know that I don't have to act okay in front of God. He doesn't love me because I'm strong. He doesn't wait for me to stop crying before he comes near. He comes even when I'm broken, even in my unhealed pain. I remember Jesus' words when he wept at Lazarus' tomb. He knew he would perform a miracle, but he still wept. Because he is not indifferent to human pain. He entered into it and shared that pain. From that day on, I stopped trying to appear fine before God. I began to pray honestly. I'm not okay, Lord. I'm scared. I'm tired. Please come near me. No long speeches, no fancy words, just truth. And it seems that it was in that honest weakness that I began to be healed. You don't have to try to say the right thing, just say what's true. I stopped. For the first time, I didn't recite a prayer. I just said, I'm doubting you, Lord. I'm tired. You seem so far away. I wasn't struck by lightning. I didn't hear a voice from heaven, but something changed inside me. Something very small, very subtle, a sense of relief, a feeling that I had just stepped through an invisible wall, the wall of pretense. And I began to learn something new. God didn't need me to pray right. He wanted me to pray real, not flowery words, not model piety, but a raw heart full of doubt, weary, but daring to come to him. I thought of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He too had prayed, if it is possible, take this cup from me, but not as I will, but as you will. Even the Son of God wanted to avoid suffering. He sweated drops of blood out of fear, but he did not hide that from his Father. I began to do the same. Every day I sat down without reading the Bible. I spoke like a lost child returning home. I don't know how to pray, but I need you. From then on, prayer was no longer a ritual, but life itself. It was no longer a burden, but a place of rest. And I realized, even though I couldn't see him right away, he was always waiting for me in the darkness. I still remember that day, as if it happened yesterday. The doctor walked into the room with a piece of paper in his hand. No sound, no warning gesture. His face was expressionless. But it was that very calmness that made me uneasy. We've reviewed all the results. The disease has progressed to a more serious stage. I don't remember how I reacted. No screaming, no asking questions, no crying. I just sat there. My hands clenched the sides of the chair, as if letting go would cause my entire body to shatter, along with the devastating news. I had thought I was mentally prepared for the worst, but when I heard those words, more serious stage, metastasis, no response to treatment, my heart stopped. All the tiny hopes I had gathered over the past few days shattered, like a building that had just touched its foundation and collapsed. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't feel anything. Only an empty void surrounded me. People tried to comfort me. There's still new medicine. There's still a miracle. You have to stay positive, but deep inside, a bitter truth echoed. I'm dying. That night, I didn't pray. I didn't have the strength to pray anymore. I lay in the hospital bed staring at the white ceiling, still hearing the doctor's words. I felt like a lost child. No one was looking for me. No one could see me. The physical pain was one thing, but the pain in my heart, the feeling of being abandoned by God, was what was drowning me. I whispered to myself, not sure who I was talking to. God, why are you letting me go like this? I believed. I tried, but I didn't hear an answer. Only the steady cold and indifferent beep of the monitor. Yet strangely, in the midst of that darkest night, something small happened. The night nurse came into my room, saying little. She stood there for a moment, then gently placed her hand on my shoulder. She looked at me and said, I can't do much, but I'll pray for you tonight. Those few words made me cry like I had never cried before. I cried like a child, not because I was afraid, but because finally I realized I wasn't completely alone. Yes, God didn't take away the bad news. He didn't make the tumor disappear in an instant, but he sent a small hand through that nurse to remind me, I am still here. In that moment of unbearable pain, I understood something. He didn't promise to stop every storm, but he promised to be with me through every storm. My heart was still broken, but this time, it broke in the arms of the one who loved me. I met her in the hospital hallway on a gray afternoon when my heart was filled with nothing but fear. I sat alone on a hard plastic chair, staring blankly at the sky obscured by concrete buildings. I didn't want anyone to come near me. I didn't want to talk, didn't want to hear any more empty words of encouragement. I just wanted to be silent, to accept that I was slowly giving up. And then she appeared, gently like a breeze. A thin woman, her skin darkened from treatment, but her eyes were bright and unusually peaceful. She looked at me without pity or condescension. She just smiled, a smile that wasn't forced. She sat down beside me, keeping a respectful distance. We didn't speak for a few minutes. She just looked at me for a moment, then spoke softly. You're undergoing treatment too, aren't you? I nodded, my eyes beginning to well up. She didn't ask any more questions. She didn't make me talk. Instead, she talked about herself, in a calm voice, as if she were telling someone else's story. She had had cancer for 3 years. She had undergone many rounds of chemotherapy, endured pain, and thought she would not survive. She said that there were times when she asked God to let her die because she couldn't take it anymore. But then one day she heard a stranger say, I will pray for you. And from that moment on, something changed in her heart. It wasn't that she was instantly healed. It wasn't that all the pain disappeared, but she began to feel that she was no longer alone. She turned to me, her eyes gentle. Now I want to do that for you. Is that okay? I'll pray for you. I couldn't answer. I just nodded, and tears fell, uncontrollably. She didn't need to know who I was, my name or my circumstances. She didn't preach or proclaim miracles. She just reached out, placed her hand on mine, and whispered a short prayer. Strangely, I don't remember what she said. I only remember how I felt at that moment. For the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. Not peace because I knew I would be cured. Not peace because of a definite promise. But peace because I knew that God was there through this woman. That afternoon, I no longer looked at the hospital hallway with fear. I still carried my illness within me, but my heart began to hold something new. Hope, a stranger, a prayer, a small light. That was how God began to heal my soul, even before healing my body. I learned something that afternoon. God does not always reveal himself in thunder or miracles. Sometimes he comes through someone sick like me, sitting down beside me and praying. That night, I lay in my hospital bed. No machines beeping, no doctors rushing in. But inside me, there was a storm. Not because the pain was getting worse, but because I was too tired to keep fighting with God. I had screamed in prayer, begged, bargained, please heal me. I will believe if you perform a miracle. I will give my whole life. Just take this illness away. But there was no response. I was still sick. I was still growing weaker. And my faith in God, if it had ever existed, is as thin as paper, about to dissolve. I turned my face to the wall, tears silently flowing onto the pillow. I had no strength left to blame God, nor any reason to believe in him. I just wanted to give up. And in that very moment, I stopped praying for healing. I stopped demanding a miracle. I only whispered, without a voice, without strength, like a lonely breath in the dark night. If you are real, please be with me. That's all. I didn't know where those words came from. From exhaustion, from despair, or from a glimmer of faith that remained. I didn't dare to hope for anything to happen after that. But in that moment, what I felt was not an answer. It was a presence. No thunder, no glory, just a strange silence. But it was no longer frightening. I was still lying there, still sick. But inside, something had changed. I no longer felt alone in that white hospital room. I no longer felt like I was falling into the abyss of fear. I felt like someone was holding me, gently, softly, but truly. I fell asleep that night, not because of the medicine, but because of peace. The next morning, the illness hadn't disappeared, but something in me had been lifted. The burden of always having to have enough faith, pray the right way, believe in the right formula to receive a miracle. I realized God's love doesn't come from my prayers. It comes from his presence. Even when I only whisper a word of surrender, I began to understand. I had thought that if God was real, he would come to me with a miracle. A morning, waking up pain-free, a miraculous test result, a heavenly touch I couldn't deny. But that didn't happen. I was still tired, still needed medicine. I still had to face the terrifying numbers on my medical chart. But strangely enough, I began to see him, not in the greatness I had once hoped for, but in the smallest things. A nurse smiled as she took my blood pressure and asked, "Are you feeling any better?" It wasn't a casual question, but a genuine expression of concern. A friend came to visit, not knowing what to say, just sitting quietly beside me. But I knew I wasn't alone. One day, as the sunlight streamed through the hospital window, casting sparkling rays on the ceiling, I saw it, like a gentle smile from heaven. No, the illness didn't disappear, but my heart began to feel lighter. Not because of medicine, but because of small expressions of love. I remembered a Bible verse I had once read, "Whoever loves is born of God." And I suddenly understood. God doesn't always come with thunder and lightning. He doesn't have to heal me right away to prove he loves me. He is here in every drop of love others give me, and he loves me through every person who breathes his breath. I began to learn to listen, to look deeper into the life around me. I began to be grateful, not because I was healed, but because I was no longer blind to love. Once, a cleaning lady who cleaned my room every morning, her hands trembling with age, smiled and said, "Hang in there, child. I pray that God will bless you." I almost cried. I didn't know who she was, and she didn't know what had happened to me. But she brought a piece of heaven to me through those simple words of blessing. I realized that miracles are not always physical. They can also happen in the heart. My heart, which had been frozen and closed, began to open. I began to feel. I began to love again. And most of all, I began to believe. I still pray, but not like someone bargaining. "Heal me, and I will believe," but like a child whispering to their father, "Thank you for coming, even though I didn't recognize you at first." Love is the clearest sign of God's presence, and I saw him in the nurse, in the sunlight, in the handhold, in the patience of my friends. No voice from heaven was needed, just love from the heart, and that is what kept me alive, both in body and soul. I had a small Bible that was given to me when I was in high school. It sat on my bookshelf, gathering dust over the years. I kept it out of politeness, but I never read it. In my mind, the Bible was a difficult religious book for holy people, or those with a lot of free time. But after struggling with illness and unanswered questions, after beginning to feel God's love through the people around me, I felt a growing urge to learn more, not because anyone forced me, but because I longed to know. I wanted to know who he really was. I needed to hear his voice, if he had ever spoken. I took out the Bible, gently wiped away the dust. I opened it randomly, not knowing where to start. And the first sentence I saw was, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I was speechless. That sentence, it was as if it had been written for me. I read it again, then again. I couldn't believe that. Among all those words, among all those pages, I had found those words. It was as if God was speaking directly to me. From that day on, I began to read every day. Not out of duty, but because my soul was starving. I found in the Psalms voices that echoed my own in a strange way. What can I give to the Lord for all the good He has done for me? I read the story of the woman with the hemorrhage, sick, shunned, desperate. But she dared to push through the crowd and touch the hem of Jesus' garment. And He turned around, not scolding or rebuking her, just saying, "Your faith has healed you." I cried. I saw myself in that woman. I was also pushing through the crowd, seeking a glimmer of hope, a touch of the divine. And God did not reject me. Another time I was lying in a hospital bed, holding the Bible in my trembling hands, and I read, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." The valley of the shadow of death, that was exactly where I was. But now I was no longer alone. I began to take notes, underline passages, and stick post-it notes everywhere. Each word was no longer foreign. They became the breath of my soul. The miracle was that the Bible did not make my illness disappear, but it changed the way I lived with it. From fear to trust, from discouragement to hope. I also began to write a journal, recording the verses I read and the thoughts that came to me as I interacted with God's Word. A small notebook, but it contained my entire spiritual journey of rebirth. In the hospital, amid the smell of medicine and the beeping of machines, I sat quietly, reading God's Word. No one understood why I smiled when I read the book, but I knew I was being healed, not just my body, but my soul. The Bible was no longer a distant religious book. It was the word of life and spirit. It was the words of one who loved me, knew me, and walked with me through the valley of the shadow of death. I began to see Him more clearly in every line, and from that day on, I never left that book, because I knew this was not just a book, this was life. There were nights when the pain came suddenly like a huge wave, without warning, without mercy. I curled up, gritted my teeth, and clutched the edge of the bed until my hands turned white. My whole body felt like it was being squeezed in agony that no one could bear. In moments like that, I used to think, where is God? If He loves me, why does He let me suffer like this? But strangely, the more I suffered, the more I felt that someone was there, not with my eyes, not with my ears, but with a deep presence that my mind couldn't explain. I remember one night when I couldn't sleep. Pain, exhaustion, and despair surrounded me. I looked out the hospital window and saw only the dim yellow lights shining silently on the empty street. I didn't pray, I didn't sing, I just lay there and cried. In those silent tears, I felt something gentle envelop me. It wasn't a pleasant feeling. It wasn't an immediate miracle. It was peace. I heard a Bible verse echo in my heart, as if from somewhere. "I will never leave you nor forsake you." I had never read that passage before, but it was clear, as if someone had whispered it into my ear. And my heart began to soften. Even though the pain hadn't gone away, I knew I wasn't alone. I wasn't fighting this battle alone. No one understood me completely, but He did. He was there, silent, steadfast, faithful. The next morning, when the nurse entered the room, I was still tired, but something was different. I smiled slightly and asked, "Is it sunny today?" The nurse smiled in surprise, as if she couldn't believe that this frail patient would even care about the weather. But to me, the sunshine that day was a reminder that He was still walking with me, through every breath, every moment, no matter how painful or exhausting. I began to realize God's presence doesn't depend on how I feel. He didn't disappear when I complained. He wasn't angry when I doubted. He stayed, and He still loved me. When my loved ones couldn't be there 24/7, when my friends didn't know what to say other than, "Hang in there," God was the one who could calm me with His silence. He didn't preach. He didn't criticize me for being weak. He just sat there, walking through the pain with me. I remember the image of Jesus when his friend Lazarus died. Even though he knew he was about to perform a miracle to raise Lazarus from the dead, Jesus still cried. He cried because he felt the pain of those around him. He was not indifferent, and I believe he cried with me. When I was moaning in the hospital, when I was afraid of the test results, when I was discouraged because I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, God was not far away. He was near. He empathized. He understood. Today, even though the journey to healing is still long, even though the pain still comes unexpectedly, what is different is this: I know I am not alone. I am no longer a sick person struggling in the darkness. I am the child of the one who loves me, walking with me every step of the way, and he will never leave me behind. I am not alone. And if you are in the darkness of illness or pain, please know this: you are not alone. God is there, waiting for you to recognize him. Not by making the pain disappear, but by giving me a peace that was beyond understanding. I began to realize that letting go was not a failure. It was an act of faith. It didn't mean giving up. It meant placing my life in the hands of someone greater than myself. I used to think that if I didn't control everything, everything would fall into chaos. But it turned out that when I let go, I saw him holding me from falling into despair, holding my mind from shattering, holding my faith from fading away. The Bible verse I memorized and repeated daily was, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act." Every day I learned to let go a little more. Let go of worrying about what hasn't happened yet. Let go of trying to control other people's emotions. Let go of obsessing over what if and if only. And learn to say, "Lord, if you allow this to happen, please use it to transform me." I'm not saying this is easy. Some days I feel full of faith, but other days I fall down, tremble, and doubt. But every time I do, I hear him remind me, I am still holding you. Today, I no longer try to make God fit my plans. I am learning to live in the present, trusting that the one who holds tomorrow is the one who loves me today. I cannot control my illness, but I know he does. I cannot control how long I have left, but I know he is writing my story with wisdom and eternal love. I let go, and he holds. I am weak, and he sustains. I am confused, and he is my light. I am no longer afraid of not being in control, for now I know my hands may be empty, but God's hands are full of power, and I am in his hands, the safest place there is. There is a pain deeper than illness, the feeling of being abandoned when you are at your weakest. When I was healthy, I had friends around me, messages buzzing, invitations to go out, promises to always be there. But when illness came, and everything began to fall apart, I found myself slowly disappearing from other people's lives. Messages grew fewer. Promises were swallowed by silence. And the person I loved most also left gently, as if I had never been important. I didn't just hurt because of the illness. I hurt because of the invisibility. The silence killed my trust. The absence of loved ones made me wonder, if I have no value when I am weak, then what was the love before? I was angry that they abandoned me, angry that when I needed a hand, a word of comfort, I got nothing but cold emptiness. I nurtured that anger like a shield because it made me feel strong, in control. But in reality, it was imprisoning me in a prison of bitterness. One day, while reading the Bible in the book of Mark, I came across these words from Jesus' lips as he hung on the cross. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." I was speechless. Jesus, in his greatest pain, betrayed, beaten, abandoned, still asked for forgiveness for those who hurt him. What about me? I carried the pain of abandonment, but no one had beaten me, no one had nailed me to a cross. So why couldn't I forgive? I prayed a simple but sincere prayer. Lord, I don't have the strength to forgive, but if you want me to, please help me to begin. And he did. Not with a miracle that made all the bitterness disappear, but with small steps of healing. I began to name the people I had resented, one by one, and I told God, I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to carry this burden anymore. It was strange. As I forgave, I realized I needed forgiveness too. I had closed myself off, pushing others away out of fear of being hurt. I doubted God, got angry with Him, and even wanted to give up my faith many times. But He didn't condemn me. He didn't abandon me, even though I pushed Him away. He didn't say, "When you are good, I will love you." Instead, He said, "While you were still a sinner, I died for you." For the first time, I didn't just believe in forgiveness, I felt it. Deep inside, a cool stream flowed into my parched soul. I wrote a message to someone who had abandoned me, not to demand anything, just to say, "I want you to know I forgive you, and I hope you will always be at peace." I don't know if they read it. I didn't expect an apology. Forgiveness doesn't need recognition. It's a decision made out of love. That day, I felt lighter, not because my illness was better, but because the weight in my heart had been lifted. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it changes me. And when I entered into forgiveness, I also entered into freedom. I am free from bitterness. I am free from the past. I am free to love again, even though I may still be hurt. Because I know, true love always begins with forgiveness. I used to think illness was a sentence, a harsh judgment for the things I had done wrong. I wondered, is this the price I have to pay? Is God punishing me? Is He withdrawing His love because I have been weak in faith, doubtful, and have strayed from the path? Those thoughts made me live in shame and fear. I looked at my body as proof of my failure. I looked at the needle marks, the prescriptions, the pain, as marks of someone abandoned by God. But then, one day when I read that passage in John, everything changed. As He passed by, He saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked Him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him." I paused at that sentence, that the works of God might be displayed. God didn't see the sick as pitiful. He saw them as a place where His love and power could be revealed. I began to look at myself and saw something strange. It was in my weakness that I heard God's voice more clearly than ever before. It was when I couldn't run after the world that I sat still and saw Him near. It was when I had nothing left to be proud of that I was free to live authentically. Illness, instead of being a sentence, became a door for me to enter into a real relationship with God. Illness is no longer the end, but the beginning. It opens up a new journey where I learn more valuable lessons than any sermon could teach me. I learn gratitude when I realize that every day I breathe is a miracle. I learn humility when I no longer have control over my body and must rely completely on God. I learned compassion when I saw others suffering and I was no longer indifferent. I learned true faith, not the faith that comes when everything is going well, but the faith that comes in the darkness, in the fever, in every labored breath. A friend once told me, God never wastes our pain, and I believe that because He Himself chose to go through suffering rather than avoid it. I remember the cross, where it seemed like failure, the end of a life. But it was there that life began. It was where Jesus was wounded that we were healed. And I understand, my illness is not where God abandons me. It is where He draws closest to me. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I'm not sure if I will recover, but I know I no longer live in fear, because God is using what seems like the worst thing to do the best thing in me. And if someone were to ask me now, "Do you wish you had never gotten sick?" I would pause for a moment, then answer, if I hadn't gotten sick, I might never have known God so deeply. And for Him, I wouldn't trade that for anything. There was a time when I thought I wasn't worthy enough to pray for others. I wasn't healed yet. No miracle had happened to me. I was still fighting every day to overcome the pain, fatigue, and silent worries. I thought, I'm not okay yet. How can I help others? What good is prayer when I haven't seen any results myself? But one day in the hospital room, I saw another patient, an elderly man, shaking as he signed the surgery consent form. He turned to me, his eyes brimming with tears. "Do you believe in God? Can you pray for me? I'm so scared." I don't know why, But at that moment, I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about how many times I had prayed without seeing any results. I placed my hand on his shoulder and softly said, "Lord, please be with him. Grant him peace, the kind only you can give." It was just a short prayer, but he looked at me, nodded, and smiled. His eyes were no longer filled with fear. At that moment, I realized that prayer is not the act of someone who has been healed, but of someone who knows that God is the healer. From that day on, I began to pray more for others. They didn't need to ask. I just listened to their complaints, their sighs, their red eyes, and I whispered prayers in my heart. Once I saw a little girl, only 9 years old, lying in the hospital bed next to mine. She timidly asked, "Auntie, do you talk to God?" I nodded. She continued, "Then can you tell God that I don't want my mother to cry anymore?" I couldn't hold back my tears. She wasn't praying for herself. She was praying for her mother. That night, I prayed for the little girl and for her mother. And in that moment, I no longer saw myself as weak, but as a conduit of peace from God to others. A miracle happened. When I prayed for others, I was strengthened. When I gave encouragement, I was healed inside. Not physically, but in my soul, where it had been broken. I began to see light, not through test results, but in every lifted gaze, in every small smile after prayer. The Lord restored Job's fortunes when he prayed for his friends. God didn't wait for Job to be healthy before using him. He used him while he was still wounded to bring healing to others. I believe God is doing the same for me. I am gradually realizing that I don't have to wait until I have everything before I can share. I don't have to wait to be healed to pray for others. It is in my lack that I learn to truly love. It is in my pain that I understand the pain of others and pray with empathy, not just empty words. I don't know if I will ever be completely healed, but that is no longer the center of my faith. I don't live just to be healed. I live to know God, to live with Him, and to bring Him to others, even in the midst of my pain. Every prayer I offer for others, I consider a seed of light. I sow, and God makes it grow. I don't decide who is healed and who isn't, but I decide to love and believe. And that is what keeps me standing, even though my body is still weak. I no longer wait for others to pray for me. I have become a person who prays for others. And strangely, in that journey, I found myself. When people talk about miracles, I used to think of something spectacular, immediate, and so obvious that it was undeniable. Like a blind person seeing again, a lame person walking, or cancer disappearing. I once longed to experience something like that. A healing that would astonish doctors, leave friends speechless, and allow me to shout, "God did the impossible." But what happened was different. It wasn't loud. It wasn't shocking. It didn't make the news. It wasn't recounted as a rare case. It began when I no longer woke up with resentment. When I looked at my face in the mirror and no longer saw a disappointed person, but someone who was alive. When I realized that days had passed without me asking, why me? One morning, sunlight streamed through the hospital room window, gentle and warm. I looked at it and didn't cry because life was unfair, but smiled because it was still beautiful, even though I was lying here. I silently said to God, if today is all I get, I will still be grateful to you. And at that moment, I understood that a miracle had just happened. I wasn't cured. The pain hadn't disappeared, but something deep within my soul had been healed. I was no longer bound by bitterness, fear, or the desire to control. I was free, not in a medical sense, but in an inner sense, and that was a miracle. I began to remember times when I laughed, really laughed, with the nurses, with my family, with other patients. I wrote in my journal, no longer filled with tears, but with words of praise. I opened the Bible, no longer just to find a verse about healing, but to find Him, not what He could do for me. A friend came to visit and said, "It's strange. You look different." I don't know how to describe it, but there's something peaceful. I nodded and smiled, because I knew that was the quiet miracle happening. God was healing me from the inside, bit by bit, no fanfare, no stage. Because He doesn't need to prove anything. He just loves. I used to think, if God loves me, He would heal me right away. Now I understand. God loves me, so he heals me in the best way for my soul. Sometimes the best thing isn't to be healed, but to be transformed. I no longer compare my miracles to others. People can tell stories of surviving terminal cancer, near-death accidents, but I tell the story of someone who is learning to love life despite the pain, someone who is discovering what it means to live with God every day, in the ordinary, in the hospital bed. And I believe that is one of the greatest miracles. You see, miracles are not always thunderclaps. Sometimes they are just a sigh of relief after a long night of tears. They are not always dancing steps. Sometimes they are just the ability to stand firm, even when tired. They are not always clean test results. Sometimes they are just a heart that knows peace in circumstances that have not changed. God doesn't need to defeat illness to be called powerful. He defeated me, my pride, my confidence, my recklessness, and my need to control. And I surrendered in mercy. My miracle isn't written in a medical book, but it's written in my heart, and I'm grateful for that. I remember that morning clearly. It was an ordinary morning. I woke up to the sound of the nurse's cart in the hallway, felt the usual dull pain, and whispered a prayer as the sunlight filtered through the window. I didn't expect anything. It had been a long time since I had expected anything from a routine doctor's appointment. I arrived as part of my treatment routine with a sense of calm. The doctor looked at the test results, frowned as if double-checking for accuracy, and then smiled. We see positive signs. The indicators have improved significantly. This can be considered a positive development. I simply smiled and something welled up inside me. Not the joy of medical results, but a deep sense of peace. I used to think I would burst into tears if I heard the news that my condition had improved. I thought I would run out of the clinic and shout, "God has healed me. He has healed me." But now when I hear the good news, the first thing I say is, "Thank you, God, not because I am healed, but because I am no longer afraid." It's strange. I used to ask God to change the test results, but he changed me first. Instead of just seeking healing, I began to seek him. Instead of clinging to the fragile hope of medicine, I was taught to put my faith in the one who never changes. It's also amazing to realize that I am no longer defined by my illness. I am no longer a patient in my own eyes. I am a child of God, loved and held by him. Medical results, whether good or bad, no longer dictate my emotions each day. Instead, faith is my compass. People ask me, "Is it because of your faith that you were healed?" I think for a moment and then reply, "No. I think it is because of my faith that I can live, even though I am not yet healed. And when healing comes, I am ready to receive it with humility, without pride or arrogance. Because if God chooses to heal me, I know it is grace. If he has not done so yet, his love for me is no less. A good outcome is only a sign of mercy, not a measure of faith. I no longer consider it proof that God loves me, but only a part of the journey he is leading me on. From that day on, I no longer counted the days until my follow-up appointment. I counted the days according to the good things God was doing in my heart. A positive thought, a prayer for someone else, a day without fear. These are the true signs of healing. I write in my journal with words full of hope, not because I'm about to be healed, but because I am living authentically in faith. And I know that God can continue to do miracles. No matter what, I am no longer afraid. If tomorrow the medical results change for the worse, I will still say, "I still believe in you, not because of the results, but because your love never changes." It is him, not medical results, that I have placed my life in. I used to be afraid to say it, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't know where to start. And I wasn't sure anyone would want to hear. Who wants to hear about pain? About long nights in a hospital bed, panic attacks in the middle of the night, or the feeling of despair so deep that all I could do was whisper, "God, are you still there?" But then one day, as I sat next to a new patient, a young woman who had just been diagnosed with cancer, I saw myself in her frightened eyes. I took her hand and said just one sentence, "I've been where you are right now." She looked at me surprised, and I just kept talking, bit by bit, not with fancy words, not with a preachy tone, just someone who had been through the darkness and now knew that the light was real. I began to share my story, first with one person, then another. Then someone said, "You should share this so more people can hear it. This story brings hope." I am not a good public speaker, but I learned to speak, not to impress, but to testify. Not to boast about my strength, but to show others the one who held my hand when I was weakest. My story doesn't have a dramatic ending. It's not, "I'm completely healed." It's, "I've been healed from the inside out. No matter what my body looks like, my soul has been restored." I share about the times God didn't answer the way I wanted him to, but showed up in ways I needed him to. I tell of each person God used to remind me that he had not forgotten me. A kind doctor, a friend who sent a timely Bible verse, a nurse who held my hand when I was shaking with pain. I tell of God not as a distant concept, but as a loving father who sat beside me in my hospital bed. And something strange happened. My story touched people I never expected. A nurse who had cared for me quietly came up after a prayer meeting and said, "I heard you speak, and for the first time, I prayed with all my heart." An old friend who had turned away from God sent me a message after reading my testimony. I thought God was only useful when things were going well, but now I see that I can find him in the midst of suffering. I realized when God enters your story, it is no longer just your story. It becomes a living testimony to a desperate world, that there is a God who never abandons anyone. I am not sharing this to be pitied. I am not sharing this to be admired for my strong faith. I am sharing because I cannot remain silent knowing that there are people like me sitting in the darkness who need to know that there is still light. And if my story, however simple, can help someone take one step closer to God, then I will share it, even if only one person hears it. I tell about the darkness, not to emphasize it, but to glorify the light that came. I tell about tears, not so that others will cry with me, but so that they will know there is one who wipes away those tears. I will continue to tell, not just with words, but with my life. Live with faith, live with gratitude, live with eyes that always see God in the smallest things. One morning I sat looking at my latest medical test results, and my heart was empty. No miracle, no obvious change. The pain was still there, just a little less. The doctor smiled gently. "We'll keep monitoring you." I left the clinic and stepped outside, and a question quietly echoed in my heart. If he doesn't heal me completely, will I still believe in him? That question wasn't easy to answer. I used to think that faith was believing that God would do what I asked, but now I've learned that true faith is continuing to believe in him, even when he doesn't do things the way we want. Even if those three words became my new way of life. Even if I still have the disease, even if the pain doesn't go away completely, even if life doesn't return to the way it was, I still believe he is good. Not because I feel that way every day, but because his word is true. Not because I see results right away, but because I have experienced his faithfulness in the darkness. I remember Daniel's three friends in the Bible. When faced with the fiery furnace, they said, "If the Lord wants to save us, he will save us. But even if he does not, we will not worship other gods." Habakkuk also exclaimed, "Though the fig tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vines, yet I will rejoice in the Lord." When I read those words, I cried. I understood. Not with my mind, but with the months I spent lying in bed, not knowing what tomorrow would bring. There were days when I was in pain. There were moments when I panicked over a minor symptom. There were nights when I lay awake, asking, "When, Lord?" But unlike before, I no longer panic as I once did. Because deep down in my heart, I know he is still holding my hand. I may not understand, but I believe. I may not have been healed physically, but my faith has been healed. God is no longer a means to achieve my goal of health. God is the ultimate goal, the one I need, even if everything else fades away. Like a song I often hear, "Even if you don't save me from the fire, I know you're walking with me through it." Faith is not a solid emotion. It is a choice I make over and over again, every day, every hour, every second. It is looking up to God, even when everything else is still unclear. I no longer put my trust in medical results or in the hope of a complete recovery. I put my heart in the one who has never left me. I used to think that the ultimate goal of this journey was healing. Now I know the ultimate goal is to meet him, know him, and learn to trust him, no matter what. I write this, not as someone who has conquered all pain, but as someone living on the fragile line between what hasn't happened yet and unwavering faith. I am not yet fully healed, but I am no longer broken. I have not been completely rescued, but I am no longer desperate, because I can say to God, to my own heart, even if you don't heal me, even if I never regain my health, even if I have to live with this illness for the rest of my life, I still believe you are good. I still choose to love you. I still praise you. I used to think, when I am healed, I will be happy again. I will live again. I will believe again. I used to whisper, Lord, if you heal me, I will follow you with all my heart. But he did not wait for me to be healthy to come. He came in the middle of the night, amidst the smell of disinfectant, amidst the beeping of the monitor, amidst the daily helplessness. I met him, not at the end of the tunnel, but right in the darkness. Not after a miracle, but before there was any hope. I met him when I had nothing to hold on to, no one who understood me, no desire strong enough to stand. He came quietly through a handshake, a nurse's prayer, a Bible verse read through tears, through peace without reason in the midst of pain. I began to see that I did not need to escape illness to meet God. I don't need to be strong, unharmed, or without doubt to be worthy of him. He chose to step into the messiest, most chaotic, contradictory, and weakest parts of me. In the midst of illness, I learned that faith is not the absence of questions, but holding on to him even when questions remain. The deepest healing is not in the body, but in the broken soul. Peace does not come from being sure that I will live, but from knowing that whether I live or die, he is with me. I used to wait to be healed so I could start my life over, but I realized it was in sickness that God gave me a new life, a life not measured by the number of days I am healthy, but by my closeness to the one who bent down to my sickbed and whispered, I am here. I have never left you. I used to be someone who only asked to live. Now I am someone who lives to testify that even without loud miracles, my life has been transformed. God used sickness, the thing I feared most, to lead me to him. Not as an idea, but as a father. Not through doctrine, but through the living love in every breath I take. Now I don't count how many times I've been to the hospital. I count how many times I've felt him close to me. I don't dwell on what hasn't been healed. I remember what I've been saved from: loneliness, bitterness, and despair. I am not saying that I am stronger than others. I still have moments of weakness. There are still days when the pain returns. But I am no longer alone. I am no longer the same as before. Not because I am healthier, but because I have seen the light in the darkness. And once you have seen the light, you cannot live as if you have never seen it. If I could say one last thing, it would be this: God is not just at the end of the road. He is in the middle of the journey. And sometimes the miracle is not that you make it through the darkness. It is that you find him there. I met him, not after illness, but right in the midst of it. And for that, I will forever give praise. I don't know where you are on your journey. Maybe you're in the hospital. Maybe you're trying to smile through the pain, appearing strong when you're completely broken inside. I've been there. I used to think, only when I am well again will I be able to see God. But he came, not after a miracle, but right in the midst of pain. He did not promise to take away all my difficulties, but he promised never to leave me alone. I testify to this not because I am good, not because I have enough faith, but because he is too merciful to abandon a desperate soul. He entered my life in the midst of darkness, and that light continues to shine. If you are weary, struggling, doubting, I just want you to know, you are not alone. God is still searching for you, just as he found me. Don't wait until you are strong to come to him. Come when you are at your weakest. For he does not despise weakness. He uses it to reach you. If this story touches you, leave a comment. I want to meet him. The team behind this channel will pray for you with all our hearts. Don't forget to follow the Tianggui Tiang Liang channel to continue your journey of faith, because God is still calling your name. In the darkness, he is the light that never fades.